Big tech censorship, I believe, is the single greatest threat we have to free speech in this country and to free and fair elections in this country. Big tech has enormous power. They're abusing it, and they're trying to silence voices they don't like, voices they disagree with. For years, I have been leading the fight in the Senate to take on and to stop big tech censorship. I'm very grateful for President Trump's leadership taking on Section 230. He just vetoed the National Defense Authorization Act in significant part because it didn't take the opportunity to reform Section 230. That was one of the reasons I voted against that bill, and I voted against overturning his veto. You are right that we haven't gotten it done yet, but I got to tell you, there is reason for the big tech companies to be very concerned. Number one, we are seeing growing and even bipartisan concern about the enormous power of big tech. Nobody in their right mind should want a handful of Silicon Valley billionaires having total monopoly control over everything we say and speak and think. Secondly, a little earlier during the presidential primary season, Elizabeth Warren tried to post Facebook ads calling for Facebook to be broken up under the antitrust laws. Stupidly, Facebook refused to run the ads and took them down. They blocked her from running those ads. She tweeted, "This shows why big tech has too much power and needs to be broken up." And I did something I haven't done very often. I retweeted Elizabeth Warren. Look, when you've got the left and right both agreeing this kind of power concentrated in one place is dangerous, that is an ominous wind that flows in the direction of Silicon Valley. Now, that being said, if God forbid Joe Biden ends up being our next president, a Biden administration would be entirely in bed with big tech, entirely unwilling to take on big tech. That's a really tragic missed opportunity, because it means that the law enforcement resources that should be protecting our constitutional rights would instead be subverted and used to defend massive power and massive money in Silicon Valley. But I'm going to continue in the Senate shining a light. I'm going to continue holding big tech accountable. I'm going to continue documenting their abuses of rights and introducing legislation to take on their power, to stop their power. And I'll tell you, there was a very important decision just a couple of months ago, an opinion that Justice Clarence Thomas wrote on the Supreme Court, where he said that the lower court's interpretation of Section 230 was arguably wrong, that it was mistaken, that it had given far too much protections to big tech. And Justice Thomas wrote that he believed lower courts should revisit and reconsider those interpretations. I fully expect to see individual litigants, to see citizens who've been silenced, to see press outlets that have been silenced file litigation against big tech. And I think in the courts we're going to see the courts stepping back from the overbroad protection they've given big tech and a return to the much more narrow statutory language, which is what Justice Thomas highlighted.
So you think that there should be, big tech should be open to litigation. You think that they need to be broken up, you mentioned. What specifically needs to, can you talk a little bit more about breaking up big tech? What does that entail, and how is that going to help us as far as them interfering with our elections?
Well, there are really two steps to this problem. Number one is making clear what the scope of the problem is. That's something I've spent a lot of time doing. I've chaired multiple hearings in the U.S. Senate. I chair the Constitution Subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We've had multiple hearings on censorship and big tech silencing the voices they disagree with, pro-life voices, conservative voices, pro-Israel voices, abusing their power. That's step one. Step two then is, all right, what's the remedy? How do you fix it? And let me readily acknowledge, no one wants to see a government speech police. The answer isn't for the federal government to regulate free speech. Free speech is meant to be free. But I've laid out three potential remedies that can stop big tech censorship. Number one is using Section 230. When Congress passed Section 230, it gave big tech a special immunity from liability because at the time Congress believed big tech would be neutral, that it wouldn't censor. They've changed their mind. Now they're censoring. There's no reason on earth they should get a special immunity from liability nobody else gets. There's no reason they should get effectively a corporate welfare, a federal subsidy from the taxpayers. And so reforming Section 230 is an important lever. Another important lever you mentioned just a moment ago is the antitrust laws. By any measure, big tech is bigger, it has greater market cap, it has more power and influence than AT&T did when it was broken up under the antitrust laws. It has more power and influence than Standard Oil did when it was broken up under the antitrust laws. And I believe our existing antitrust laws allow you to go after those who abuse monopoly power, and big tech is abusing monopoly power. I'm encouraged the federal government filed lawsuits against big tech, and a great many state attorneys generals have filed lawsuits against big tech. That's going to help hold them accountable. And then number 3 is a theory that I've laid out that sounds in consumer protection and deception. And at its simplest, it is the promise big tech makes. When you or I sign up to a social media account, the promise they make is that if you choose to follow someone, you'll see what they say, what they post. And if someone chooses to follow you, they'll see what you post. Big tech is breaking that promise, and they're breaking that promise every day. They're lying to consumers because if they don't like what you say, they're not letting the people who've chosen to follow you see what you say. And if they don't like what someone you follow is saying, they're not letting you hear what they're saying. And so all 3 of those are remedies. I think we need to pursue every one of them. And I'm going to keep leading the charge on that.
Okay, one more question that's a little more specific. So as far as big tech being this danger to our elections, do you have an opinion on which company is the most dangerous to our elections? And which CEO?
I do. I think hands down Google is the most dangerous company on the face of the planet. If you look at, we just recently had a Senate hearing with the big tech, the 3 big tech CEOs with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Google is the most dangerous because it's the biggest by far. It has the most power by far. It controls the vast majority of searches people do. In a hearing I chaired in the Senate, we had Dr. Robert Epstein, who testified that Google, through manipulated search outcomes, shifted over 2.6 million votes in 2016 to the Democrats. And Dr. Epstein is not a Republican. He is a liberal Democrat who voted for Hillary Clinton, but is outraged to see that kind of abuse of power. Google is clearly the most dangerous. Twitter is the most brazen. We just recently had a hearing where Jack Dorsey testified with a beard that looked like he'd crawled out from under a bridge. And you know, I got to admit, he is just openly, we are left-wing and we are going to silence anyone who disagrees. And essentially he said you can kiss his rear end if you disagree. Well, as I asked Mr. Dorsey at that hearing, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what we're allowed to read? Look, Twitter brazenly censored the New York Post when it ran stories about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's corruption concerning China, concerning Ukraine and Russia, and they just silenced it. Not only did they prevent you and I from circulating those stories, for 2 weeks they banned the New York Post. The New York Post is not some fly-by-night organization. It is the newspaper with the 4th highest circulation in the country. It was founded by Alexander friggin' Hamilton. And big tech has decided they're in charge of the media and they get to decide what's reported and what isn't. That is brazen, and Twitter is shameless about it. Facebook, look, Facebook's conduct has been highly problematic. I will give some degree of credit that Mark Zuckerberg at least acknowledges the need to protect free speech. I think he's benefited because Twitter and Google are so rotten that even though Facebook's pretty bad, just saying free speech is important makes him appear markedly better than his rivals. But all 3 are very serious concerns.
Great. So lastly, just about the election, do you have confidence in the Republicans pulling through on Tuesday, or what do you see as the outcome?
I think it is very close. I hope so. I think it all depends on turnout. It's why I'm down here campaigning, barnstorming. It's why I was here just a couple of weeks ago, before Christmas, after Christmas. It's all about turnout. And I got to tell you right now, the Democrats have turned their base out. The hard left has showed up. And it really comes down to Election Day. I think there are a lot of freedom-loving Georgians. I think there are a lot of folks in the state of Georgia that just believe in common sense, want to see low taxes, want to see low regulations, want to see small businesses grow and prosper. They want to see us support law enforcement and not defund the police. And they don't want to see the radical left in charge of the Democratic Party. They don't want to see Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and AOC driving our national policies, and they certainly don't want to see the United States Supreme Court packed with 4 radical liberals who will undermine free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. I think every one of those issues is on the ballot here in the state of Georgia, and so I'm hopeful. I think the people of Georgia want to see some reasonable check and balance in Washington, but it all comes down to turnout.